Hey guys, Brett Weiss here. Welcome to another video. I want to talk about the Atari 2600 today. One of my favorite game consoles of all time. I want to tell you guys about the very first time I ever owned an Atari 2600. If you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. This is it. This is the original wood grain model I owned from day one. Now day one for me was a little further down the road than a lot of you guys. I didn't get my Atari 2600 for a few years. So let me tell you why. In 1977, when the Atari 2600 console, then the Atari VCS, came out, it was $250. That is a lot of money. That's, I don't know, $800 or $900 today. I didn't look it up. It's a lot of money. And at the time, we only got gifts totaling $100. Now, I'm not whining or complaining about that. That's just how it was. $100 could get you quite a bit in the late 70s and early 80s. I got an excellent bicycle one year. I could get those Mattel handhelds. Those were 30 bucks, so I could get a couple of those for Christmas and have some left over for some other things. Great Christmases, but an Atari 2600 just wasn't going to happen. So luckily, a bunch of friends of mine got them, and I was around junior high age. I would ride my bike to friends' houses. I remember my buddy Lawrence Thorpe, who had Air Sea Battle. He got the 2600 right when it came out, and he got some of the launch titles. It came with combat, but I remember playing Air Sea Battle with him. I loved that game. And Mike Mall, I would ride my bike to his house. He was a buddy. He was a year younger than me, but we both played basketball. We had a lot in common. And he had combat, of course, built in with his 2600. You know, the cartridge came with the unit. And we would play the heck out of that, you know, driving around in our tanks, shooting each other, flying in planes, battling one another, mano-a-mano action, long before Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or anything like that. This was what we called two-player simultaneous fighting games. We weren't fighting with fists, bullets. Great game, combat. And I remember, just as an aside, in the 90s, combat got a bad reputation because when video game collecting sort of started taking off a little bit, combat was seen as lousy just because there were so many everywhere. It wasn't a desirable collectible. If you go to a pawn shop, they were all over the place, stacks of them. But it's a fantastic game, and we would play the heck out of combat and listen to Air Supply. Remember that light rock band? Here I am, the one that you love. The one that I loved was my 2600, or that I eventually ended up getting. So, I didn't get my own game console until 1982, ColecoVision for Christmas. It had come out in August of that year. I finally got a ColecoVision for Christmas in 82. I did have to kick in $100 because ColecoVisions were $200. So I had to pay for half, had to give Santa $100. And I've told you guys this before, but I haven't really mentioned, I don't think, much about when I got my first Atari 2600. I didn't get it till the spring of 1983, a little over 6 years after it came out in 1977. I didn't have a job yet. I was just mowing lawns and doing some side jobs. I was 15 in spring of 83, and a friend of mine at school in my art class, we were talking about video games, and for some reason we got to talking about, he just brought it up that he had an Atari 2600, he no longer wanted it, and he just wanted to get rid of it. He had a 2600 with 10 games, and he said I could have it for $10, a measly $10. I could get $10 for mowing a yard back in 1983. What an amazing deal. And a big yard, I should say. And this was awesome. I was so excited about this. Like I said, I didn't have, in the summer of '83, I got a job, so it would have been easier to get a 2600, but in the spring of '83, I was still just with the ColecoVision. I was really enjoying that, and I had several games for it. But it was so cool to add a second system to my CRT television set that I had back in my bedroom on my desk. Super, super exciting. I could finally play classics like these at home. I didn't have to wait for anybody's turn. I didn't have to ride my bike over to anybody's house. I didn't have to leave when it was time to go. I didn't have to, I could just play them anytime I wanted, pretty much, for as long as I wanted. As long as I wasn't at school or something or asleep. I was playing Atari like crazy. It was so exciting. And what you have to understand, I'm going to get to another game in a minute that I was really excited to get on the 2600. But what you have to understand about this time, in 1983, it was considered completely uncool, at least in my circles in school, to play Atari 2600, or to say you had Atari 2600, because by then the Atari 5200 was out, and more importantly, and more germane to my friends, the ColecoVision. A lot of my best friends had a ColecoVision. Bill Pritchett, who I was really good friends with, Brian Wood, who was on my basketball team, Eric Fresh, and on and on and on. I had a lot of buddies with ColecoVisions, and we would trade games, we would go to each other's houses and play games. So much fun, so great. And that was the new, hip, cool, current system with amazing graphics. And people back then, even in 1983, people were laughing at the blocky graphics on the Atari 2600, whereas they seem charming now and retro and cool and 8-bit and all that, back then they were just considered garbage in 1983. And it was so exciting to just have my own Atari 2600. And one game I was really super excited about was Omnidar, because I kept seeing this game in comic book ads and magazine ads, and even on television. They would show commercials for Omnidar, and it just looked like so much fun. I mean, listen to this. You're a gorilla. You try to color all the boxes in the maze by tracing around each one. Wild warriors pursue you at every turn. If you survive the gorilla game, you're a paint roller pursued by persistent pigs. You're filling in boxes, like Pepper 2 for the ColecoVision. That sounded like so much fun, and a little bit like Kicks for arcades in the 5200. But Omnidar was a disappointment. It was really slow, and it wasn't as fun. Later I played the arcade version, and it's much better. But Omnidar, I still enjoyed it, and I like having my boxed copy. But it was, the reason I point this game out is because now that I had my own Atari 2600, I could start buying games for it. I considered buying some 2600 games I wanted for other people's consoles. That just seemed weird, maybe games that were on sale that I wanted. I couldn't get a 2600 console because it was too expensive, but I considered buying games just to play at other people's houses. I never did that because that just seemed crazy to me. But now that I had my own 2600, I went out and I bought Omnidar and a bunch of other games that I wanted. And this also coincided with the great video game crash of 1983. As the year wore on, I kept seeing more and more Atari 2600 games in clearance bins, closeout bins, on sale. First starting at $14.99, then $9.99, then $4.99, $2.99, and then 99 cents. That's the cheapest I ever saw a video game back in the day, was 99 cents. Friends have told me they got some for 49 cents, and some even said for a quarter, but I did see 99 cents as the cheapest. I also bought, during this time and beyond, I was buying games at garage sales and everything. I want to show you guys a tub of my third-party games. They're cartridge only, so I got most of these at garage sales. You can find a ton of Atari 2600 games at garage sales in the late 80s and in the early 90s. Throughout the 90s, really. Check this out. This is just a sampling of my Atari 2600 collection, and I will probably go through this tub and show off these games more in depth in another video. But anyway, it was awesome to have an Atari 2600, finally of my very own, where I could play it anytime. So awesome. So what I want to know from you guys is, when did you first get your Atari 2600? Are you an old guy like me, and it was when you were in high school or junior high or something, or a little kid, and you got it, it was fairly new or whatever? Just tell me your story. Or did you get one recently because you've discovered retro gaming and you really enjoy it? Or did you just grow up with Intellivision and get Atari later? Whatever the case, I want to hear from you guys. And if I've got any younger viewer here, I would love to hear from you. Is it considered uncool now to have, if you only have the PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 4 and you don't have the PlayStation 5, you're still playing on those two consoles or whatever? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for hitting that like button. Thank you for sharing this video on social media. That's super important as well. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. We will talk to you guys in another video. If you're a fan of my work, you might want to consider supporting me on Patreon. For just a low fee each month, you get a lot of extra content. Another way to support the channel and my writing career is to buy books direct from me, including the 100 Greatest Console Video Games, the Classic Home Video Game Series. It's like an encyclopedia set. And this massive bad boy, the NES Omnibus Volume 1 A through L. I will put links in the description of this video where you can buy books direct from me and where you can support me on Patreon. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.